ICQ Podcast episode 249, SDR Play. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 249th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by Dave Bowie, Zulu Lima 4, Delta Romeo Bravo, and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB W9ICQ is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief. This episode's feature is a feature recorded by Chris in his conversation with SDR Play. Well, as always, we'd like to thank the donors that help keep us advert-free on the ICQ podcast show. And this episode, we'd like to thank Dave Bowie from Christchurch, New Zealand, Zulu Lima 4, Delta Romeo Bravo. And he sends a quick note saying the ICQ podcast is a great service to the ham radio community. He can enjoy the hobby whilst he has to do his domestic duties, like mowing the lawn with his headphones on. Always something interesting to be heard in a friendly style, like listening to a QSO net. Keep up the good work and kind regards, 73 from Christchurch, and that's from Dave Bowie, Zulu Lima 4, Delta Romeo Bravo. Thanks a lot for your donation, and that along with the monthly and the annual subscription donors, keep this show advert free. You can do your bit by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate. Anything you can send away is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Chris, Martin, Dan and Ed to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including the history of UK special event call signs and help required for Red Cross efforts. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 249 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Good evening. How are you doing, Martin?
Not so bad, Chris. Good to hear you. And we have Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Good evening.
Hi, mate. And you're going to try and get me in trouble as always?
I'm going to do my best.
I thought you might.
If not here, then at the radio show at the weekend.
Fine. We have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hi, guys. I
didn't manage to move your location this time. I got the number right, didn't I, Dan?
Excellent work.
Yeah, not bad. And we also have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, evening, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you on as well, Ed. I missed the last episode. Young Colin did it. I wasn't sure if he was going to do this one, but I haven't heard from him for a couple of days, so I'm here, and you guys have to suffer me tonight. The call sign is M1MRB, and I'm Martin. Starting the news roundtable, we got a news story here. Says history of UK special contest call signs, and Chris GM3WOJ has posted a short history of these special contest call signs, which have been made available for the last 21 years. Now, I find this really strange because, and it must be really difficult for somebody outside the UK understanding the UK call signs and all the different variants. Dan, is this something that really throws you when you hear sort of things like G8Z or M7R or something like that?
We're kind of used to the one-by-one call signs here in the US, but yeah, in general, those UK call signs threw me for a while. But after being on the podcast here with you guys and corresponding with a few UK hams on Twitter, I'm kind of making sense of it.
Right. Well, I'm glad you understand it because I go for it.
I didn't say I understand it, but I'm making a little bit of sense of it slowly.
Yeah, the one that got everybody was the Olympic call sign, the 2 Oscar 1 2 Lima, and that threw a lot of people. And I know that various members of us worked that, didn't we, Mine?
Oh, gee, yeah. I find these short call signs as confusing ever. Like even like our club call sign G2XP, we still get people saying, "Well, what's the rest of it?" And I'm like, "I got G2XP. What's the rest?" And I don't go in for contests, but if you're going in for a contest and you're trying to have to explain it, surely the idea is that you get as many as possible. So the actual short call signs doesn't really help. The 2 Oscar 1 2 Lima doesn't fit any of the criteria that meet our other call signs anywhere. So I spent ages with people trying to explain, no, it's 2 Oscar, 1 2 Lima. And people still don't understand that. But my question is, how do we know if these call signs, when you hear them on the air, how do we know if they're real or not? Because if I'd have heard 2 Oscar, 1 2 Lima, and I didn't know, I'd have thought, well, hang on a second, that's a pirate. What about, other short call signs? I mean, is that real? Do you just have to take it for word that it is genuine?
We often, so as a club, we have 2 call signs. One of which is we have G2XP, which is a shorter call sign, and we've done a few contests using that call sign. And a number of times someone will say, and your last character, your last letter, have you called? And there isn't one because it's a shortened call sign. So yeah, you think you're right, Martin. Having to explain that it actually can. I mean, I don't know. Maybe regular contesters, maybe it's not a problem. But yeah. And I guess it's some prestige. If you've got a short, 3-letter call sign and 4-letter call sign, there's some prestige there, and it's obviously something that's a bit historic and been around for a while, or something that you've inherited or been donated, or something you had to apply specifically for. So certainly, I can see why the big contest groups would want to have that short call sign. But
how does it work from the point of view of if you've got like logging software and your software at the other end doesn't support it? It wants an extra character.
Well, that's a problem with software, isn't it? I suppose that needs to be fixed. But yeah, certainly I can see why there's that prestige there, and I can, it's nice to see that someone's written something that explains the history of it. That's really interesting. But I think for us, not fairly casual operators, it's sometimes a little bit confusing, I think.
Yeah. And the other thing is that technically when we're out as a club, we shouldn't use G2XP or G7SAC. We should have actually use it properly and go GX2XP and GX7SAC.
What does the X represent then? I've not heard of that.
The X is a UK, an English club call sign. There's prefixes for all of the UK countries, Scotland, Wales, and the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man. And it's buried deep in the licensing. Nowadays, you don't have to do it, but there is technically.
I was going to say, we've been pirates and we didn't realise it.
No.
Because I don't know I've ever used X.
So it's really confusing. So, and I think Dan, in terms of trying to figure out how UK call signs work, I think we're probably one of the only countries in the world where, well, maybe not that's for sure, but certainly, if I take my call sign so my call sign is M0TCH. If I go to Scotland's, my call sign changes to MM0. TCH, which is, so we teach this on the foundation course. So when people to come to the license, they have to learn all these rules about what the different call signs are, how they change throughout the UK. So for someone that hasn't done the course, and of course it's different for every country, I'd imagine it's quite confusing. Just looking now, what we don't cover though are some of those special ones like club call signs. So things I didn't know about because it wasn't something that was ever taught to me. Were things like if you're on Guernsey and you have a club call sign, then you've actually got a call sign starting with GP or MP, and the number and then the letters. Or although apparently this is optional, or if you're in Wales, it's G or MC. If it's a club call sign, Jersey's G or MH, for example. So it's
you're probably never going to hear them on the air because it's the nature of human beings that we're all lazy. If you don't have to say it, you're not going to use it. It's like the /mobile. Most people don't do it anymore. Yeah,
but even us UK amateurs get confused by some of these things. So, quite how folks that are not in the UK, understand that, I don't know.
Well, Ed, you hold a German, Australian, and a UK license. Does it confuse you as well?
Yeah, it annoys me actually because I'm not sure who decided to make this sort of ruling with the, it's 50, 60 years here or more, that the different countries within the United Kingdom or Great Britain and Northern Ireland actually have this second letter that identifies which country they're in. If you look at several other countries in the world who have larger parts to them, like the states in Australia, the Australian states, and somebody travels from one state to another, you put a suffix on the end. So, if you're going from New South Wales to Victoria, my New South Wales or my Australian call sign, which is licensed to an address in New South Wales, is VK2JI. If I travel to Victoria, which is the state across to the west from New South Wales, my call becomes VK2JI/portable3. So you know what's going on. But taking a similar thing in the UK, my UK call is G8GLM. But if I go up to Scotland, it becomes GM8GLM. And by them doing that, you've then locked out, or probably 2/3 of your possible call sign ranges, because I've got G8GLM, nobody can have GU8, nobody can have GD8, nobody can have GW8, GI8, GM8, and that's another one I've forgotten. But you've suddenly, if you like, wasted 6 call signs on one person because you can't have that call sign used by somebody living in that other part of the UK. It's confusing because then you add an M to it as well as G, and then you add the 2 call signs to it as well. Yeah. And it really is a quiz question to work out what the call sign means. It's just so complex.
Interestingly, when there was a review a few years ago with Ofcom of the UK licenses, and I've got a feeling when that review happened that those amateurs in the UK operate our call signs in a certain way. So we get told on the foundation course that if I drive from England into Wales, then my call sign changes from M0 to MW0. I've got a feeling that was actually a misunderstanding, because when that review happened, there was talk about that, and actually you were just going to use your home call sign. And I guess that would mean then that maybe there could be both of those 2 call signs existing together for different people. So, Martin, do you remember that at all? At the time, there seemed like there was some confusion as to the way that we were using our call signs.
I think that was discussed, and I think they opted to continue the old way because most people understood the old way, and that was the way the books were written. But I don't really, in fairness, I don't think Ofcom really care in many ways. I mean, a lot of things.
As long as we behave ourselves, then they mind, do they?
In fairness, as long as we behave ourselves and we operate correctly, I don't think Ofcom give 2 jots whether you're operating in Scotland or the Channel Islands.
Well, the only issue is going to be at some point we're going to run out of call signs. There's only so many permutations that there can be. So at the moment, it's not a particularly efficient. I think, as Ed was saying, it's not a particularly efficient way of managing call signs.
The additional numbers like M2,
That's right.
7, M8.
M7, yeah. But even then, at some point, we're going to run out. And in fact, so are all countries, because there's only so many combinations of call sign that are available. So whether they decide to recycle them, I don't know if that ever happens.
Well, I was going to say that
in the UK, does it?
That's the other thing I was going to raise. In many countries, if somebody dies and their call sign isn't passed down to somebody else in their family, then it becomes available for other people to claim. So, as we mentioned, 2-letter call or 1-letter call signs or whatever, they're obviously sought after. And for example, in New South Wales, again in Australia, there's actually a lottery almost if you want to get a 2-letter call sign. And that's a call sign of somebody who's died a couple of years previously, because they've all been issued. So recycling the call sign makes a lot of sense. Blocking all those possibilities out doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all.
I've got to ask a question, though. I know we've gone quite a way off the story itself, but what does it matter where you are? And okay, we say that if we go into Wales, we become MW0. But at the end of the day, if you are causing interference to someone and you say your call sign, so if it say for example, I'm in Wales, whether I say MW0 or M0, if I'm causing interference to someone in Wales, all Ofcom can do is look up the address where my license is registered, which is my home address, and then they will contact me via my home address to say, hey, you're causing interference. Where I physically am located is completely irrelevant.
Well, if you're mobile, that's one thing, because you're hopefully going to move away from where you're causing the interference.
Yeah, but if you're
portable, portable or static mobile, you could be causing interference to an RAF airfield or something, and then they're not going to wait until you get home to contact you.
No, but they're not. But how are they going to find you? And all you're going to say is, "Okay, I'm in Wales."
Yeah, that's also a true point.
The way that they contact you is they're going to look you up, even if they've got I don't know if they've got mobile numbers for us. They're going to contact you via your home location, so it doesn't actually matter whether you use it or not.
Not
because
sure.
They're still looking you up to find out where your license is registered.
Do the UK regulators require your mobile phone number?
I don't know. I can't remember.
No, I don't believe
Okay.
so.
No, I
But
don't think
I
so.
believe-
Somebody
So they're gonna have to
does.
write to
One
you
of
via
my
your house.
licenses does, and they gave it exactly for that reason. I can't remember if it was the German one or the Australian one. They wanted the mobile license, the mobile phone number for if I'm operating portable somewhere, so they can contact me directly.
That would make
It
sense.
might have been on
What
an NOV for a particular band, actually.
And that would make
What if a
sense because if you
licensee
are
doesn't
causing
have a
interference,
cell
they can come back to you.
Yeah. Well, a number of things on what you just said. A, the states recycle the call signs because I'm now the custodian of W9 ICQ. It's been issued many times before, and I'm hoping to hang on to it as long as possible. So I'm the custodian of that one. And secondly, I believe we're supposed to, if we're not operating from our home address, we're supposed to give our location within 5 kilometres of where we are. So I suppose if you were, for argument's sake, in Scotland, Wales or the Channel Islands, if I said M1 MRB operating in Cardiff in Wales, that's as good as operating MW, probably better for tracking me if there's a problem. But
Again, the only way they're going to contact you is via your home address, so
or call
it's
you on the
necessarily
radio,
relevant.
or call you on the radio and say, please shut down, you're causing a problem.
And I am actually looking on the website for Ofcom, and it has your mobile phone number as being required.
Oh, there
So
it was.
actually,
It was
so
off.
they actually have. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
it's got. Sorry, no, sorry, that's not true. Main phone number is required. There's an optional field for mobile number. Sorry, so
Most
it's
yeah,
easy to give
mobile
a
anyway,
number.
don't they?
In my case, it's both the same because I haven't got a home number, so it's my mobile. So yes, there is an option to provide that to Ofcom. So they'd probably give me a ring.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, anyway, we've gone mega off topic on this.
We have.
But
So
it's
what's
an
new?
Yeah, but it's an interesting subject, and there is a list of these special call signs. Just because you hear shortened call signs in the UK doesn't necessarily mean to say they're a pirate. They're probably a special contest call sign, and I think the easiest way you're going to tell that is that they'll be being used in a contest, and they will have very slick operators. Nobody's going to be a novice trying to use a call sign like that to out a
And
contest.
Martin, how would you check it? Do you do what most people do on the bands? You go to qrz.com and find out who they are.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did with one of the ones that's given as an example in the show notes. That call sign, we said, well, it might not exist. I went onto qrz.com. It sure does. The guy's listed there. So as long as they put it, especially clubs or contest groups, they're normally going to put their information up there. So, you know, somebody wonders about a call sign, they'll go to qrz.com and make sure it's there. If it's there, they'll probably say it's okay.
Yeah, I would guess so. So, interesting. And if we got off topic a bit, guys, apologise, but it's quite a hot subject sometimes. Moving on, a new digital voice repeater has gone live in Ireland. Just round a corner from Colin in Waterford City. And I'm quite looking forward to having a go at this. It's being a repeater keeper, Martin, what do you think? This one does DMR, D-Star and Fusion.
It's interesting. If anybody asked me to try and build one and add DMR to our repeater, no. It's an interesting technology, the fact that it does all of them and apparently analog as well. I'd certainly like to learn more about it. It runs MMDVM, which I think is a similar sort of technology that is based, I think in the Pi-Star stuff, or the equipment has to support it for Pi-Star to run. So you never know, maybe it's running on some equivalent type of software. I'd like to know more, how do you switch it between the two? Okay, if you put Fusion in, you probably get Fusion out. If you put D-Star in, you get D-Star out. But let's say, for example, you connect it to D-Star 1C. How does a Fusion user come along and disconnect it? I'd be interested to see how that goes. Equally, I'd be interested to see how it works from a DMR point of view, because D-Star and Fusion, you're just using effectively a data port on a radio, so you're putting effectively data on an analog carrier, and that is generating the digital then. DMR, my understanding of it is pulsing, so the carrier is on, off, on, off, on, off to allow somebody else into the different time slot. I'd be interested, because this looks to be an analog repeater, the radio that they're using for it. How does that work? Will it support the two time groups? I don't quite understand DMR. I can't get my head around it yet, but I'm interested to see how that works, but good luck to them.
Martin, just to let you know, MMDVM is the open source multi-mode digital voice modem.
Right.
So I guess that's the software rather than anything else running on some kind of chip.
So that's obviously
as
how
you
it
say,
generates digital stuff.
often used with Raspberry Pi boards, but I don't think it's restricted to that. And it actually says it handles DMR, D-Star, and other modes.
Well,
so
I
it
think
looks like it's designed for this exact. MMDVM seems to be designed for this idea of let's have repeaters and equipment that can do all the digital modes.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think it's excellent that we've now got repeaters that you're not locked into one particular technology. So I have a D-Star repeater, D-Star radio. I've also got a DMR radio as well. I don't have a fusion radio, but it's almost like, well, with D-Star at the moment in our area, we're now down to one repeater in the area. Then I can't get into that particularly well, to be honest. So you can having to rely on your own little dongle or your own little device at home to be able to use that network. Well, if we're now getting repeaters that can support more than one of those systems, then that's great. It means you haven't got to go and buy a new radio, because we've now found there's a whole bunch of new DMR repeaters that have come on the air. We've now got our own system fusion repeater that's got on the air, but you have to have a particular radio for that technology, and it means you have to go out and spend. And these radios tend not to be too cheap either, although the DMR ones aren't too bad. You have to go and invest again. Yes, well, I was come on to that at the end actually, but yes, the DMR radios. I'm currently, and I'll talk about it when we get onto the what we've been up to section. But I've been playing around with that a little bit actually in the last few weeks. I think it's great that we've now got you not having to go and invest again in what could be quite an expensive technology, because the support for that for the infrastructure in your particular areas has gone.
Although the one thing that I think would, for any manufacturer, whether it be ICOM, Yaesu, Chemet, whoever, if one manufacturer came out and said, you know what, forget this, we're going to support all three technologies in our radios, we're going to bring out this radio, it's going to cost this much, it'll do D-Star fusion and DMR, I reckon they'd steal the market.
There was talk, wasn't there, at one point about, and it never actually materialised as a bit of vaporware. There was a manufacturer, and it wasn't one of the mainstream ones.
or someone like that.
Something like that, yeah. It wasn't one of the mainstream manufacturers, and it never.
They said, they're in prototype. They're coming out soon, and I think they were due to come out in sometime in August, about 5 years ago. And I think their website still says they're coming out 5 years ago.
And I can't remember what the company was now, so I don't want to mention it in case I get it wrong. But yes, unfortunately, that never came to market, which is a real shame. I think that was supposed to be a DMR and a G-Star radio. I think it was before Fusion sort of took off. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a real shame that didn't ever come to fruition. And I was wondering, having previously spoken, and I've forgotten what it's called now, the guy we saw at Newark, and we also saw in Germany, Martin, Bob, and his DMR radio that's based on Android. I wonder if, because that's all software based, I wonder if there's anything in software that could be done. Of course, I'm talking about that now. Probably D-Star, because it's got a physical chip in it to do the encoding.
I think the other ones have to have a physical chip in it as well, don't they? The Ambi chip, I thought they needed.
That's right, the Ambi chip. That's right. I'm not sure, but it'd be nice to actually get it in software so that you just have to, install an app, and you've now got a new mode.
Yeah, but I think it's patented in a way that you have to go buy the Ambi chip
to license it from DVSI.
Yeah.
But if they were to sell that as a software component, okay, you got to pay for it. But if they were able to sell that in software rather than physically in firmware, and you could then load that onto your Android or your whatever operating system powered device, and you then got
money making.
You then just got an app.
Well,
you just
that's why we've got things like Codec 2 happening, because that company will not sell it in software because they're afraid people is going to copy it and pirate it. Yeah. And that's why they have it in hardware, and that's the way that they lock in their profits, which is, it's a company, it's there to make money.
So it's their proprietary.
Which is why the open source Codec 2 is the one for digital voice for HF, also for VHF and UHF, but not in this kind of field that we're talking about now. More for point-to-point contact rather than repeaters.
Dan, you've been very quiet and probably haven't been able to get a word in edgeways.
No. I'm afraid I'm kind of a dinosaur when it comes to digital repeaters. We're just in the process of putting up a DMR repeater here in Ann Arbor, and I'm just not plugged into it.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I must admit, I live predominantly on GB3XP, and I have my mobile in the car set to either auto detect with its straightforward FM or fusion, and that's how my mobile operation tends to go at the moment. But I'm quite looking forward to this one because this is a UHF repeater in Waterford City. From where Colin lives, about 20 minutes drive outside the city. I reckon I should be able to get into this one, and it'd be nice to be able to give this one a try when I'm over next. So I'm quite looking forward to this one, and as Martin says, it sounds interesting. I think the proof's going to be in the pudding, so I might try it on DMR and Fusion. My D-Star is very seriously sick at the moment, so unless I fix that before I go, it'll be just the DMR and the Fusion. But interestingly, nice.
Yeah, Martin, if I can just jump in with one more comment here. I think the biggest issue they may have is the back-end networks and interface into them, because, of course, DMR have Brandmeister on the Motorola network. D-Star has its own network. Yaesu Fusion has its WiresX network and other networks. Yeah. It's all right saying you can have a repeater where it'll receive one mode and either put out the same mode or a different mode to communicate with people mobile in the area. But a lot of the advantage, I think, of the digital voice repeaters is the interconnect to other systems or to other repeaters. And I wonder how on earth you're going to get all of these to work together, or is that what All-Star does? I know there's an All-Star, which is basically a PABX or IPBX. Perhaps that's what that's going to come in as at the back end, because otherwise you're going to be, how are you going to get into the right networks and things?
I wonder if there's going to be something. I mean, you bring up a good point. You talk about Brandmeister, Phoenix, and all the different DMR networks. But I wonder, because in the Fusion world, we've got the CQ UK talk room, which primarily is Fusion, but there's a DMR link into it on 4409. There's going to be a D-Star link into it as well. I wonder if, with a repeater like this, maybe this is sort of the start of these networks merging, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, okay, with this repeater, it obviously doesn't matter what kind of radio you've got. I doubt you'll be able to go in DMR and come out Fusion, but I wonder whether you'll be able to link onto a Fusion or a D-Star network via DMR or whatever. Be interesting whether you can do that. So I guess there's limitations of the software, I guess, more than anything.
So you'd be gateway in between, like
they
do at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, but I wonder if this is going to open it up. I'd certainly like to know, more about this.
Well, I think it's an interesting technology, and not planning to be over in Ireland before Christmas, but maybe in the new year we may get a chance to see how well this works. So that'll be good. Moving on, Tunisia legalises individual licences, and I went to Tunisia about 10 years or so ago and saw literally no amateur radio licences anywhere in the country, or as I went out and about around Tunisia. Now, it's not to say there aren't any, because obviously there is, but individuals are going to get licences, which to me sounds a good thing. Dan, you're a DXer, and one thing I know, you like working in lots of different countries. Have you worked in Tunisia?
I was thinking about that when I read this. I'm not so sure that I have, but I bet I have, because I do pretty well into Africa there. But what intrigues me about this is, what's their motivation for doing this now? I mean, is it some rich guy who wants an individual license, or is someone in the government saying, hey, if we give out individual license, that'll motivate people to get involved in technology-related careers, or whatever the motivation is? That's what I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I don't know what the motivation is. I mean, as you say, it could be somebody has pressured the government to doing this. It might be that they're trying to soften the approach to the country. I mean, I remember being there, and it was almost, we obviously went to tourist areas majority of the time, and the thing that struck me is every roundabout had a police station on it. All right, a little like sentry box, but every roundabout seemed to have policemen on, and it was not a police state, but it did sort of leave me wondering a little bit.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Martin, because Tunisia, of course, went through a revolution back in, just looking at the internet here, back in 2010, 2011, So about, what's that, about 7 years ago, looking at the dates on here. So I'm wondering if this is actually, because so things will have changed quite a lot since then, I'd imagine, because they've had a change of government, etc., and a change of regime as part of the Arab Spring. So I'm just wondering if there's been a change perhaps in the culture or in the government over there, and there's been this is part perhaps of that, a result of that perhaps. There's been, obviously amateur radio is a great way of communicating ideas and, to people outside of your own country. And I wonder if previously there was some sort of control about that, and they were worried about people, talking to people outside of that country using various communication methods. So perhaps now it's a little bit less restrictive, and they've decided to allow people to have their own. It's only a theory. So it's like people have their own call signs and their own licenses.
You could very well be right on that one. So yeah, I think that sounds like a good one. Ed, your thoughts on this one?
I don't think I can add anything except my suspicion would be that prior to this, you had to be a member of a club to be able to operate amateur radio in Tunisia, perhaps, which is what's happened in certain other countries. That amateur radio's got in, but purely on a club basis where it's obviously easier to monitor and control. And now they're releasing it to individuals. And what's interesting is they say that if any of the people living there already have a foreign license, they'll be granted the license without even taking an exam. And also resident foreigners can apply. So it really does seem to be opening up to be more democratic, more, allowing people to do their own thing with amateur radio. And yes, it will also help their technical education and everything else in the country, I guess.
Well, it's a great promotion, I would suggest. It's an easy and cheap way of promoting your company abroad, isn't it? So, yeah, I would kind of say. Martin, left you to last, and probably everybody said most, but what's your thoughts, mate?
Well, not much more to add on this. I mean, it's nice to see another country pushing amateur radio forward, obviously realising there is value to it. I'll be honest, I didn't realise that Tunisia didn't have individual licence. Out of interest, be interested to see how many others don't. And there's obviously a few, I guess we can probably guess about, but it'd be interesting to see how many other countries don't permit it.
All in all, I think individual licences for Tunisia is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Moving on. The Red Cross asked the ARRL for assistance with the Puerto Rico relief effort. Now, I kind of like this because, the ARRL and the being asked by the Red Cross is a step forward. They're obviously recognising the work amateur radio do, and I think it's quite a good merge to get things done. Normally I'm going to go to Ed this time. Go on, Ed. You've heard some of this, but it seems to have moved on a little bit over the last few weeks, hasn't it?
Yeah, because when I first heard this, I thought it was that the Red Cross were asking for people to enter the data. But we've looked at this in detail now in the links, and it appears that the intention is to radio the information about health and welfare, so, who's safe and what resources are needed, etc., back to the states where it gets entered into the Red Cross database, so they can provide supplies and ship them out and plan and everything, which is really great. I mean, great for Puerto Rico, which I know is actually a what would you call it? A U.S. protectorate?
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth? Yeah, okay.
Commonwealth.
Yeah. But what about all the other islands around there as well? I would hope that the Red Cross are looking to, to do things in the other countries as well. I heard Dominica is also very badly hit, and of course the Virgin Islands, both the US and the British Virgin Islands. So this is very good, as you say, Martin, that the Red Cross has approached the ARRL to ask for help. I wouldn't be surprised to find that there might be the other countries asking for help as well.
Well, this hurricane that's gone through the Caribbean, the series of hurricanes that have gone through the Caribbean have literally ripped the place apart. I have a friend that was about to fly down to the British Virgin Islands to do some work for 2 or 3 months, and the hurricanes come in and they put him on hold, and now they've had to cancel it because he's actually seeing pictures of the buildings where he was going to work and they've literally, the hurricane came through and just ripped the whole inside of these buildings out. So the buildings are just shells, and he said pretty much the contents of the buildings strewn for about the next quarter of a mile across the island, and it's not a pretty sight. So they've taken phenomenal damage, but that's as a side. Chris, do you want to pick up on anything on this one?
Well, I think it's, I think most things have been said, but I think typically it's that usual thing where amateur radio comes in and steps in when everything goes wrong. I remember hearing on the news that Puerto Rico, the country had no power literally the whole country had no power as a result of the hurricanes. And I don't know what the situation is right now, but of course it's fantastic that the ARRL are able to assist with the Red Cross. They're able to use their equipment they've got through their handmade service, so they can. It's already there on standby. They've got these cases full of kit. The ship down there, and they're on the air, and they're able to provide that on the spot support. And that's that communication is absolutely vital in getting the assistance into the right places, letting people know people in the family are safe. And it sounds like it's really well coordinated. We've got this, working very closely with the Red Cross and providing information about the internet that they're receiving from the amateurs that are out there and helping. So I think it's a great example of how amateur radio can help, and it's part of the service that we can offer when things go wrong.
Dan, you're much closer to all this than we are geography wise, and seeing the ARRL, I mean, they obviously have kicked into this sort of thing many times before. They ask for very specific skills along the line, but what's your feelings on this one?
Well, I think this is actually the first time that the Red Cross has actually asked the ARRL for specific things like this. And I think that's just the indication of how widespread the damage was there. I mean, the whole island was without power. I mean, the total island was without power for, at least 24 hours, 36 hours. And one thing I will bring up here is that they already have all 50 volunteers, and they're getting ready to send them if they haven't sent them already. And the ARRL is asking for some help. And I think, here in the States, ARRL takes a big hit for always sending out fundraising letters for this or that. But I think this is a case where hams might want to kick in a few bucks to this effort, and they can go to the ARRL website and do it. Donate 25, 50, 100 bucks, whatever you can afford to this effort. I would encourage at least those of us in the U.S. to do that.
As I say, I just know a little bit about the British Virgin Islands because a friend of mine was going out there, and it is totally wrecked. So, these poor people, any aid in that is very important. Sorry, Martin, I've left you to the end again, but I won't do it next time. The skills here look quite general, don't they? You've got to be a general class license operator, HF and VHF skills. So
strong technical skills, ability able to work under difficult conditions, deploy for up to 3 weeks, and work as part of a team. Very important that. Well, the whole thing here, I mean, we said it before, when all else fails, amateur radio, to me, it's another reason to join your national body. Obviously, you may one day get asked to help, and hopefully you're not one of the people that will one day need help. But if you can do it to anybody, if you can help for anyone else, then fantastic. If you've got the skills, put your hand up and say, yeah, I'd like to go and help out, in any way, shape or form. And as Dan says, if you're in a position that you can donate some money towards this cause, I mean, do it.
Yeah, but it's good that they found the 50 people they wanted, and hopefully they had a few more in reserve just in case. So our thoughts go out to everybody who suffered problems with the hurricanes around the world, in the Caribbean recently. So as I say, good news story. Red Cross and ARRL working together, so that's a good one. Now, I got corrected by Ed on this one, but quite rightly so. VERON meets the regulator to discuss RF pollution. VERON are the Dutch society very much like the ARRL or RSGB, WIA, depending on which country you're on. And they're complaining about RF devices that are causing RF interference. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Oh, I thought you were going to throw Martin in first, since you always seem to put him to the end.
Oh.
VERON, as we say, is the National Society for the Netherlands. And the story talks about the fact that they've actually met with the regulator there to discuss the problem of basically RF interference coming from photovoltaic systems, in particular the inverters used for solar panels. So your solar panel creates something like, 24 volts DC. You need to convert it to 240 or 220 AC to put it into the power grid. And the boxes that do that are obviously not being built correctly and are causing a lot of interference in Holland, as they are everywhere else. So it's just an echo of what we've heard in other countries, that the regulators in these countries are not keeping an eye on equipment being RF noise free. They're just letting anything get in, or it's got in and they've got to catch up now and fix them. But how are you going to fix it if somebody's installed solar cells on the roof of say 20,000 homes or something? I don't think you're going to look very good if you go to them and tell them, sorry, you've got to all pay an extra whatever N thousand euros to replace the faulty equipment that you're running and you're causing interference with.
I guess to some extent it depends on where you are causing the interference as well. If you're causing it to amateurs, then we'll speak up. We'll have a shout about it. Whether we can get anything done about it, I don't know. But if you found that you were causing interference, these panels were causing interference to critical comms, say for example the fire brigade, the police, whoever, I think they would have more of a case. Broadcasters that pay a lot of money, mobile phone companies, if they're interfering there, I'm sure these things would get shut down very quickly. I have to ask the question again, and we've asked it before about other things. These products being installed by these companies are causing interference. What are they actually going to do about it? Who's responsible for the cost if they have to be replaced? Can they be forced to remove them or repair them or replace them? And who pays for it? Does the person who owns the panel, who bought it in good faith, replace it? Or does the manufacturer or the installation company have a sort of a reason that they have to look after it? I forget the word that I'm looking for now, but do they have a reason that
regulation,
something like that? Yeah. But where they have to get involved and actually know, we sold it to you, it's our responsibility to put it right.
But at every new electrical installation, isn't there supposed to be a highly qualified engineer that signs it off and accepts responsibility for it? Whether that's a new power line into a house or solar cells or whatever it is.
You'll probably find that's a safety thing from the point of view of, okay, you've got a live mains cable at 230 volts or something like that. Yeah. You're perhaps going to integrate it into the national grid. In that, yes, I don't know the rules in Holland, but in that, then yes, there's probably a regulation. But you'll probably find half the installers don't even know these things can generate RF. They've probably never even heard of RF.
Yeah. But absolutely, maybe they don't have the skills.
Yeah. Probably needs to be specified in the form that they're signing off on.
But you see,
and then maybe you can get the skills.
You see, any of these devices, when you're converting from DC back up to AC, you've got to have an oscillator running somewhere. So it's in its nature, it's going to be noisy, unfortunately. How much noise is the thing. And the majority of, there are standard institutes all around the world. We used to have the British Kite Mark, now you've got the CE label. The FCC in the States, have removed things because they've become RF noisy or stopped things going into the States. And I think it's a matter of these devices, if they're being installed without the relevant regulation sticker on them, then it becomes the person's responsibility because they've purchased something or they've got an installer to install something that's not correct. If it has got the manufacturer's approval on it, the government approval on it, then surely it's down to the government to get it sorted.
But
you
these
can't-
marks and things that you can, I mean, it's like pat testing, isn't it? You can go on eBay, you can buy a roll of stickers that say pat testing and stick them on stuff, and then people will stop questioning you. It's the same with stuff. You buy stuff in from China. I'm sure I've bought stuff that's got a CE mark on it. You know, that blatantly hasn't got a CE. You know, it's blatantly one they've just stuck on there because they were told they had to have it.
That's China Electronic.
Yeah.
It is.
Or they have got the correct tests passed on the first batch of
On the test model that they
500,
sent off for testing.
and then the remaining ones, the accountants come by and said this still works. We take half the components out, so we'll do that. Oh no, we still keep the label, of course. We don't retest.
Ultimately, I would imagine this is a question of regulation. So
Yeah,
certainly here in the UK, the regulator is Ofcom. In the US, it's the FCC, and obviously there's a similar regulator in the various countries around the world. It mentions in this article about the one for the Netherlands, and it's up to them to investigate and to enforce the regulations ultimately. So if people are found to be illegally selling products with approval that turns out they haven't got approval, then it's up to them to enforce the regulations.
Yeah, but you can't make if we're talking about solar cells on top of houses, you can't make the house owner responsible for this.
No.
It has to be the installing company.
With any regulation, it's up to the people that ultimately, where does the blame lie? If the householder in good faith asked someone to install something onto their roof, and it turns out that doesn't meet the regulations, then unless the householder, the person was complicit in that and knowingly did it because they thought it was cheaper or something. If they asked someone to go away and provide a solution to provide, some kind of solar power to their house, and it turns out that the person that recommended and installed that system didn't check that the device had regulatory approval, or in fact the device did have approval but actually didn't really meet it, then it's up to them or the manufacturer to resolve the issue, isn't it? I would suggest.
Yeah, it's really the installing companies that have to check this.
Yeah. It all comes down to money, right? So like if my neighbor puts up a noisy photovoltaic system on his roof, and all of a sudden you get on 40 meters, well, personally, I'm not going to be able to afford a lawyer to go sue him or sue the installer or whoever, right? So, I mean, that's really going to be the big problem here. And, here in the U.S. anyway, and the FCC is cutting back on regulations. Trump got elected with his calls saying he's going to get rid of half the regulations on the books. And I don't know. I'm not optimistic. Let's put it that way. I mean, we can talk about regulations all we want, but you need a legal framework that's going to support that. And I don't know about Great Britain, but here in the U.S., the tide is turned, and we're going anti-regulation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are coming in that as you say, don't meet regulations, and I think the general public, because they can't hear RF noise, don't care, and I think it's only when it gets up into the VHF FM broadcast band that they'll start complaining. And maybe even not them, because they might have even gone off onto internet radio. But the problem is unless it affects the masses, they don't care. They don't care about hobby. They don't care about noisy voltaic cells or devices on roofs because it doesn't affect them. And human nature is you go for the best or the cheapest option. We all look for the bargain, and it's a difficult one. I just don't know where it's going to end, but it seems to be a worldwide thing because all of the regulators are looking into it. Don't know, guys. As I say, let's hope they do something about it. Right, the last news story. One from Dan. So you can go first on this one, Dan. But Dan says there's new personal radio Part 95 rules take effect tomorrow. So by the time this podcast goes out, there'll be some new rules. Do you want to take us through them, Dan?
Sure. So the FCC is making some changes to the Part 95 services, which includes the General Mobile Radio Service, GMRS, Family Radio Service, FRS, and even CB Radio. Oh, one thing I thought was kind of amusing, they're actually changing the name of the Citizens Band radio service. They're taking the word Citizens Band out, and it's going to just be called the CB radio service. I don't know what the reason for that is, but I found that a little bit amusing. But as far as the CB radio service, and this will maybe tweak a number of hams, especially the older hams, there's now no limit on how far you can talk on CB radio. So you can, it used to be illegal to actually work skip communications before. Now there's no rule against that. Some of the other interesting things about the rules changes, the FRS family radio service, which a lot of people I think use, even hams, now the power limit has been bumped up from a half watt to 2 watts. And some of the GMRS services or MRS users can now make use of some digital applications, which they weren't allowed to before. So there are some interesting changes there as far as the rules go.
Well, Chris, you use some of these frequencies. You've been in the States. What's your thought?
Yeah, I've used the FRS before when they said also license free, similar to our PMR 446 service here in the UK, but of course on different frequencies. It's interesting that it's gone from half a watt to 2 watts, so the digital, 4 times the power. So that's interesting. Also interesting that the FRS shares certain frequencies with the kind of licensed GMRS service. So that's interesting. Also, Dan mentioned about the CB service and now being able to communicate over a longer distance. I had no idea there was a restriction on how, even if you could hear someone, I assumed you could hear someone, you could talk to them. But up until now, that wasn't the case. So that was quite an interesting rule. I don't know how you'd actually know, unless the person told you where they were, where their person was, and whether you were or weren't allowed to talk to them. So that was a bit of a strange rule. So yeah, it looks like there's some good things coming out from the FCC, and they're kind of loosening the rules a little bit. And I think from reading the internet here and reading the announcement, these all seem to me like quite sensible changes, and I think they're going to help people to use radio. So it's all for the good for me.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I know that I'd heard stories of people on Citizen Band in the UK working somebody in the States. So that's certainly over the 155-mile range. But for somebody who uses CB lingo as a way of winding people up on the radio sometimes...
I don't know what you're talking about.
What do you think, good budgie?
I think it's a big 10-4. Well, I didn't realise that there was a difference. I mean, it does seem odd. I mean, as Chris mentioned, unless you ask them, how are you going to know where they are? And okay, I think Dan mentioned there were call signs in the early days, but in order to ask someone where they are, you're talking to them. I work on the basis if you can hear someone, why shouldn't you talk to them? I've certainly heard Americans and people in the States coming in on CB in the UK, albeit on the he's coming through via AM, but you can hear them from time to time. And thinking back to my days early in CB here, in the early 90s. Okay, CB was dying in the UK by then, but I've certainly spoken to people in other countries on it. Okay, the same rules don't apply here, but it does seem a bit odd. But from the other point of view, the rest of the more powerful GMRS, that's got to be a good thing. I mean, our 446 band, which is a similar sort of thing, is 0.5 watts with a fixed antenna of about 5 centimeters long, so it's not very efficient. Because of that, I pay for a PMR license, which gives me certain frequencies at VHF and UHF, which gives us up to 5 watts of power, which gives us the range that we need for what we want to do. But these changes, it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
There was a strange one that I know it's actually just reading through the documentation here. So they're now going to allow for CB radio hands-free operation, which again seems like previously quite a silly restriction. Surely a lot of people that are using CB radios are people in vehicles, truckers. Certainly when I've been to the States, I've listened into the CB frequencies, and certainly everyone I've heard typically is in a truck driving around these big rigs, I think they call them, over there. And
why would you want to stop people doing that?
Well, the rules now are to allow that, but previously I was wondering why that wasn't allowed. So again, it seems quite a sensible proposal to actually allow hands-free, because obviously from a safety perspective, that makes a lot of sense. It looks like perhaps previously it was classed as remote control. So they've now clarified that that's not remote control, and therefore that is allowed.
A lot of these license free and CB, there was nothing wrong with CB apart from certainly in the UK government crippled it by the amount of power you could use, but more effectively than that by the type of antenna you were allowed to have. So your antennas were very, very poor.
Your antennas were inefficient to start off with, weren't they?
Yeah. So and that's how they effectively reduced the range and made it very localized. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, the limitation on the distance, I suspect, would be because the regulators in each of the countries don't want citizens without a license transmitting outside of the country. So that could have been the concept behind limiting the range and limiting the efficiency of antennas. Yeah, and if they want to talk to people outside of the country, then they probably should get trained and get an amateur radio license.
Did you not need a license before for CB then? Because you certainly did it in the UK up until 2007 or something.
No, it was
well, you
illegal,
did in the beginning.
Okay.
They did require them in the beginning. Whether or not people got them is another matter. But
they worked just
about
as
10
well
or
without
15
them, Dan.
Yes, I know. And 10 or 15
but was the
years ago,
license...
they got rid of the licensing requirement altogether.
But was the license they got something you went down to the post office and paid for and got over the counter, Dan, or did you have to take a test for it?
Oh, yeah, there was no test. You just sent money into the FCC.
Right.
But they registered where you were based.
No.
Say that again?
They registered where you were, so they knew your address of where your station was.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that you have skills to know you're not causing interference. It doesn't say that you have skills to make sure you're not putting yourself or other people at danger.
Hence the
Oh, yeah, and the technical, the low power rules and all that was supposed to take care of that.
It was all to protect them. Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm saying. That's why the concept, I think, of CB when it became legal in the UK and when it became legal in other countries. As I suppose something similar to what your family radio system is now, Dan, that it's meant to be localized and low power. I wonder if, by the way, on the FRS and the what was the other one, GMRS, if the increased power is simply because the equipment that's around probably runs that power anyway. So rather than the FCC having to worry about going and checking people, which they don't have the people to check with, they can just say, okay, if it's that model, yeah, we know it's higher power, but it's now okay.
Is this going back to the same thing that we had in the UK some time ago, where they, rather than try and prevent people using like the larger antennas, which, come on, let's face it, everybody was using half-wave and 5/8 wave antennas when you should have been using half of a quarter wave. Are they just saying, actually, we know people are using Baofengs and things, whatever, we'll just legalize, additional power, therefore these radios are no longer breaking the law and we don't have to deal with it?
I don't know. But with a lot of these things is that you're only likely to get... I don't condone and suggest people go out and break the licensing rules for all these bands and devices, but you're only likely to get into trouble if you're causing interference. Because the difference between, say, running half a watt and 2 watts, or 2 watts and 5 watts, the difference between 2 watts and 5 watts is probably less than an S point. So, in fairness, I sometimes think that when a foundation license beats me into a pile-up, it would be nice for me to say, he's using more power than me, but in actual fact, he's probably got a better antenna, and he might just be in the right location, and I'm not. So we all like to blame the equipment, not our operating skills sometimes. So it's an interesting one, Dan, and thanks for raising that with us. I'm sure our listeners will be interested, and certainly things like the 155-mile rule in the States, I wouldn't have known about. So that was interesting, I felt. So all in all, a good one. Okay, well, what we now do is have a quick run around the table, find out what everybody's been up to. Dan, do you want to go first?
Sure. So what I've started a week and a half ago is I'm actually now teaching a CW class for some of my club members.
Right.
Finally got enough of them interested in it that they asked me to do this. And we're using the CW Academy materials that are published by the CW Ops Club. And we're using Skype, and we do it 2 evenings a week. And we've had some problems with Skype so far, but we're working through it. And our goal, my goal anyway, is, I don't know about the students, is to have them good enough by next field day to make some contacts at field day. And I'm hoping to have a second CW station at field day, one for these newbies and one for the more experienced operators. So that's been a lot of fun so far.
Sounds good to me, Dan. Sounds good to me, and it'll be very rewarding in the end when you see it come to fruition. So that sounds great. Ed, what have you been up to since our last podcast together?
Well, I guess the top of the list is taking most of my time. I've been testing a new wideband antenna, a mobile 40 metre to 10 metre mobile antenna. I've been trying out both mobile and portable. It's one that I bought, and perhaps when I've finished all my tests, I'll actually do a piece for the podcast. But just saying, that's an ongoing task at the moment. The other thing is I'm trying to get into working the new digital mode FT8 from a SOTA summit. So actually just yesterday I've managed to get my Windows tablet working with my Yaesu FT817, and so that's going to be the next thing to get tested from the top of a mountain somewhere. And I've just been thinking what's been taking my time over the last couple of weeks, and this is probably not directly radio related, but technical anyway. I've been transferring some VHS tapes to digital files before video cassette recorders become totally unobtainable and the tapes deteriorate.
Yeah. Well, it sounds one of those jobs where probably needed doing. And
Yep.
You look at some of the YouTube videos and the quality of them. They were obviously VHF tapes at times, or done on tape. Some of the old stuff up there, but it's nice to see that it'll be nice for you to have the stuff in a format you can use and keep it that much longer. So that's a good one, Ed. Martin, what you been up to? I was going to say you must have been up to something. You normally got something to catch me on.
Got something up my sleeve, yeah. It's funny Ed mentions about converting VHS to digital formats. I've got a VHS machine downstairs. It's one that does VHS to DVD. And I've, that's a project I've been working on for a long time. I've got thousands of videotapes and just going through them, trying to do that. But that's an ongoing problem. Same thing with audio tapes as well, just converting them to MP3. But that's been ongoing for a while. So what have I been doing? I've been trying to answer a question. People keep emailing me about the repeater, and they're trying to ask me questions about Fusion. And I'm trying to do tests and stuff with them. I can remote into the server for XP and do some things there. So I've been trying to help them out with things like that. People saying, how do you connect to this? How do you do that? I'm struggling, but I'm still very much learning. So that's nice to see. We've got quite a lot of new people using XP. I bought some parts to build an antenna. I think I mentioned on the last podcast that I've been playing with an RTL or a similar device to an RTL dongle. I don't actually know what it is. It's not got a brand written on it. It's just a black box. But I've been playing with that, trying to download some decoding data and stuff. And I wanted to build a weather satellite antenna. So I went to a local hardware shop, picked up some copper pipes and some angled bits, and I've got the designs of how to build it. But of course, the one thing that I couldn't get hold of was any solder to solder the pipes with, because you have to use a different type of solder. Ironically, local DIY shops, the three main ones that we all know of, they all sell blow lamps, they sell gas, they sell pipes. Do they sell the solder? No. Fortunately, Screwfix do, so I managed to get some of that. So going to be able to have a go at building one of those. Also got some parts to build an ARRL antenna, or a similar design to an ARRL antenna, because I want to have a go at satellite stuff.
Well, you have to show us your satellite antenna design you're going to use, so that'll be interesting. And you could have used ordinary solder. You just end up using a lot.
Just lots of it.
Yeah, I think they said that there's some reason that it corrodes quicker or something if you do that.
I imagine it's a flux or something.
I've got flux, but it's strange that sort of the three main ones that we all think of in the UK, they don't even sell it. I mean, you ask them, they're like, oh, we don't have that. Like, why would you sell
They
everything else.
They probably sell the pre-solder ringed ones rather than the one. Well, I don't know if they sell the end. I think they call them end feed or end fed.
Maybe.
Not like the ARRL, but as in the ones you have to solder rather than have the solder built in connections.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but it was just strange that they didn't have any.
Although I've actually got some as well. If you want any, I've actually got some solder of that type at home as well, and some flux.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that now, but unfortunately I've already bought it. So yeah,
Martin,
fortunately he's lead solder. It was like £5 from Screwfix. So
Martin, I go to my my favourite hardware store that's about quarter of a mile down the road from me.
Yeah, that's a proper hardware shop. The one in my local town is closed down.
Yeah, but he has everything in there. It's Aladdin's cave. I go in there, spend 3/4 of an hour looking round and dribbling at all the stuff he's got, and I still have to ask him for what I want. It's easy.
And a napkin to mop up the dribble.
Yeah, if you're in a hurry, you just go in and ask. You don't bother going looking because it will take you 3/4 of an hour to have a good look around and find it.
That's the thing you don't get in in your normal hardware shop, your normal DIY superstore, do you?
No. So that's what I like about him. So that's a good one. So Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been making some notes. Actually, turns out quite a bit over the last few weeks. As you know, Martin, we've both been to HMS Belfast last weekend. We were there Saturday, along with Matthew and also Tim, who is a member of our club. So we had lots of fun there. 4 of us on the ship. Very busy. Made lots of contacts on the air because a few of us there were able to do that, as well as talk to the public. And Martin, we did speak to somebody that listens to the podcast, didn't we?
We did, Michael, and he was on a special event station, GB2, was it? Or GB, I think it was GB2.
Do you know what? We wrote down all his details and then left him on the ship. So I really apologise. We've forgotten your call sign, but we do appreciate you calling in, and we had a good long chat with you, and you liked the podcast. And maybe next time we go, if we can find that notepad, we'll get you on the next. We'll get your name on the next one, perhaps. But really apologise. We didn't actually. We wrote it all down so we could talk about you on the podcast, and then immediately left it on the ship. So I'm afraid it's still sat there right now on the ship. Yeah. But yeah, we had some good fun there, and very busy. Did lots of more certificates and talked to lots of people from all around the world that come to visit the ship. And it turns out today, just out of interest, there's been some news that's just come out today about there's going to be a new HMS Belfast that's currently being built in Belfast. So there's going to be a second one, a completely different sort of ship. I think it's a much smaller one, but obviously much more modern. And they're going to rename the one that we go to HMS Belfast 1938, which is the year it was built. So that's quite interesting. Other things I've been doing, I have got a headset. So I haven't gone and bought one from the, should we say, the main manufacturer of amateur radio headsets. I went out and bought I did a bit of research on the internet. I found a website that's quite good, talked about good headsets for use with amateur radio, but cheap ones, better, cheaper ones. So I paid about £40 and got myself a COS headset, a KB40. Now the reason I chose that particular one is it's got a dynamic microphone, most PC headsets have got an electret microphone insert, microphone elements, and they require a voltage for them to work properly. Whereas this particular COS one has got a dynamic one, and therefore that isn't required, and that works perfectly with my Yaesu radio. So I made up my own adapter. So I've got the 8-pin connector to go into the rig, and I've got a couple of 3.5mm connections soldered onto that. One for the microphone and one for a PTT. And as it happens, I had a foot switch that I'd bought a number of years ago at a rally. So I've now got that in operation for the PTT. So that actually works really well. I got on the air with it, and I was really pleased that it actually worked straight away. Made a few contacts, and very pleased. So now I can work hands-free, which is really good, and quite like that idea. So I've been putting that on the air recently, and I've actually been doing a reasonable amount of HF recently as well. And I've noticed that the bands, even though we're not looking too good on the sunspot cycle, at the moment actually it's actually pretty good. There's been quite a few stations in the early evening I've been hearing from the States and Canada, Middle East. I know we worked, Martin, didn't we, from the ship? We worked Saudi Arabia and a few other kind of further away sort of stations. So I think the conditions actually aren't too bad at the moment, despite what it should be. So that was all good. And Dan, I actually worked a contact last night on CW. It was very, very short. It was literally my call sign, a signal report, and 7.3. But I got brave. I thought I'd give it a try. and it worked. So I worked, and I forgot now whereabouts the station was, but I think it was Russian. I'm trying to think of the call sign, but I can't think of it off my head. But yes, so I did actually work a contact. So I did get brave, and I managed to do it. So
But did he slow down for you?
I must admit, I was slightly cheating. Although I did actually get the call sign from listening, but my rig actually does decode Morse, so I did have a backup. I did have a backup there, but no, he worked me, and he did come back with my call sign, so he definitely heard my call sign. So we did actually technically have a QSO. It was very, very short, but I did get my call sign out, and he did repeat it back to me, so I was quite pleased. I probably didn't follow any of the CW protocol, but yes,
that sounds great. That's the first of many, I hope.
Absolutely. So I will have to persist and try to improve my code reading skill, shall we say. So that was great. That was good. Nice to do that. Other bits. Finally, I have been playing with DMR. So Martin, you mentioned earlier about DMR, Martin Rothwell, should I say, and how complicated it is. So I thought I'd actually have a little play with it and try and get my head around it. And actually, now that I've reprogrammed my radio and I've got the talk groups and things, and I've done a bit of research, it isn't actually that bad. So I'm going to spend a bit more time on that. And Martin, I believe we're doing a talk about it, aren't we, at the club? Time next year about the various different digital modes. So DMR, Fusion, and D-Star. So I need to do a bit more research, but I think I'm starting to get my head around it now a little bit more. So so that's all good. And then I suppose finally, we're next at the weekend. We're going to be in Newark. And I'm sure, Martin, you want to pick on this, don't you, Martin Butler? So perhaps I'll let you talk about that on your section. So I'll pass it back to Martin.
The thing we have to mention, though, is that when this goes out, we were at Newark.
Oh, yes.
This goes out when we get back.
Yes, it's a good point. Yes, this is Wednesday, and we'll be there.
No, well, I haven't been doing that much. I did go to the Belfast, as Chris said. That was very, very good. I suppose in the last couple of months, I've done the last 2 club talks at the club. One was on the ICQ podcast, which I got asked to do by outgoing secretary. And in fairness, I didn't have to answer too many questions because there were probably 50% of the audience were listeners and were able to give the answers. So somebody asked a question, the audience answered it, so it was quite great. But it was good, and we trialed a new style of club talk. Now I'm sure other clubs do it. We were running short on ideas and speakers, so we took 4 YouTube videos, short YouTube videos on various topics, and decided to do watch a video and then have a group discussion on it and see if there were better ways than the presenter was showing you. I'll answer any questions if anybody hadn't had any ideas and that sort of thing. And I think it was reasonably well received. So that was quite good. Radio wise, yeah, Chris, I did bring my my DMR up for you to put the same code plug in as yours. But I had a look at mine. I'd done a lot of work on it prior to up until last time I used it. And I'm going to have a look at your code plug and have a look at my code plug because we might have some common themes in there, Chris. So I'll bring mine with me to Newark, but we can reprogram it maybe in Newark. But do that.
We can swap notes, Martin. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing is I need to upgrade Martin's one as well. So won't happen in Newark because it means I've got to bring a really old PC, and we'll have enough old stuff going on that we probably won't get time to do it in Newark, Martin. But I will do it for you.
No, it's fine. I appreciate that much. I think we'll be on an analog channel in Newark then somehow.
Yeah. No problems at all. Okay, so. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6N News.
My pleasure.
It's great to have you as always. Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Very welcome, Martin.
Cheers, Ed. Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, nice to be on again. Great fun as usual.
Yeah, great. And Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Very welcome.
You've tried very hard to get me into trouble, but you haven't.
I do my best.
You always tell Emma it's my fault.
Well, in fairness, usually you lead me astray.
Yeah, it's true.
But one of us does, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right, then. I'd like to say 73 to you all, and don't forget, guys, we'll do this all again in about a month's time with the four of you, won't I? So have a good time in radio. 73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with news in Australia, where Jeff Osborne, VK5 Hotel Echo Lima of the Lower Murray Amateur Radio Club, is hoping to establish a community radio station for his local area. The problem, he says, he found when he moved to the area was that there's a lot of small clubs that can't get their messages of voice out and are not connected to each other in any way. So he felt a community radio station would give them a platform to share plans, events and communicate with the public. Since November 2016, Osborne has been requesting an FM frequency through the Australian Communication Media Authority to get the station off the ground. Potentially this radio station would replace LMARC built 5MU, which remains the leading station for the area, but as I say, they're hoping that the new station will last just as long for 100 years. Now, whilst Mr. Osborne's had a knockback from the ACMA, he's still very positive about getting them to reverse their decision and potentially allow him to create his community radio station. So, Jeff, we wish you the best of luck with your project. US Air Force Academy satellite FalconSat 3 is now open for amateur radio use as a digital store and forward system. The FalconSat 3 was originally built throughout 2005-2006 by cadets and faculty members of the Space Systems Research Center at the US Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and it was launched in 2007 on the Atlas V. After serving in scientific and training roles, the Academy has now made the satellite available for amateur radio use. The satellite is in a 35.4 degree inclination orbit with an approximate altitude of 465 to 476 kilometers. Packet bulletin board system is operating at 9600 baud with a 145.840 uplink and a 435.105 downlink. And output power is 1 watts. So we've got a link to all the technical information you need on this at the ICQ Podcast website. Check it out, icqpodcast.com. And news here that following on from the recent natural disasters that have struck the States, the Yasme Foundation has announced that it's made a grant to the ARRL's HAM Fund. And this is a fund that supports amateur radio response to hurricanes throughout the US and even stretching into the Caribbean and the US territories there. The fund, which was created in 2005, was created in response to the need for equipment and resources to support the amateur radio response to hurricanes Katrina, Rita and Wilma. The group make equipment available on loan to amateur radio organisations during disasters response when communication equipment is required. The Yasme Foundation is a not-for-profit corporation organised to conduct scientific and educational projects related to amateur radio, including DX introduction and promotion of amateur radio in developing countries. So we've also got a link for the ARRL's page for setting up personal donations for that there, and as obviously you can check that out at the ICQ Podcast website. Well, now we head over to our feature in this episode, guys. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ Podcast.
Okay, it's Chris here. We're here at the National Ham Fest in Newark, and I'm joined by the team from SDR Play. We've got John here, G4ABQ, and we've got Mike, KD2KOG. So we'll start with John. John, very good afternoon. Welcome to the podcast. And I understand you were one of the co-founders of SDR Play.
That's right.
Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the background, to maybe your background perhaps as well, and then a little bit about how SDR came about.
So my background is, as a 14-year-old, I became a radio ham many, many years ago, and then kind of grew out of it. And but it was gave me a grounding in electronics, and I've worked in the semiconductor industry pretty much my whole working life until a couple of years back. In fact, 3 years ago, we formed the company, SDR Play, and my background in ham radio combined with the other founders who actually had developed semiconductor technology for SDR for the commercial market, was a great combination. We came together to recognise that there was this huge interest in using commercial technology for amateur use, for hobby use, and suddenly the technology was capable of covering frequencies from like long wave up to gigahertz. And we formed a partnership with a company called Mirix, who really developed mobile broadcast technology, and applied that to the amateur world.
So a real game changer then in terms of what you can do. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about software-defined radio and how that's different to maybe a more traditional radio with a dial on the front.
So with an SDR, you're really doing all the processing on a host computer. Typically, it could be a Windows PC, it could be a Raspberry Pi, but the host computers of today are perfectly capable of processing a whole swathe of bandwidth and converting the I and Q, the phase and quadrature signal that comes from the SDR receiver, and doing all the demodulation, which increasingly is all the different digital technologies on the computer rather than in dedicated hardware. And so one of the real advantages now is if you want to go and explore bands that perhaps weren't amateur bands a few years back, you don't have to buy new hardware, because you can cover everything from long wave up to gigahertz with just one SDR receiver. And with the spread of the internet and the worldwide community of support that's grown, what we've been able to do at SDR Play is really reach out and find help people get started, and then those people who appreciate the help have then gone on to grow and become the community that actually supports this product. And I think that's
a great introduction to Mike then.
Mike,
absolutely. So Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Mike, tell us, you've got quite an interesting background and how you came about to get involved in SDR.
I've been interested in radio since I'm 9. I've been interested in radio since I'm 9 years old. Got into SDRs about 10 years ago from New York in the States, from a friend through the internet, and from having all the different SDRs, came across the SDR Play. And when I first picked up the SDR Play, didn't really know much about it, and found the Facebook group, joined the group when it was literally, I think, 50 members, maybe less than that, became the admin, and now it's something over 7,000, almost 7,000 members.
Huge explosion then in the number of users there.
Yeah, then emailing myself with SDR Play back and forth, and then just helping the users for almost 2.5 years.
And now you've got that taken that now into actually working for SDR Play.
Now I work for them.
Fantastic. So
yeah,
that must
a dream
be
come true.
Absolutely fantastic. So, Mike, you know quite a lot, obviously, about the product range that SDR Play have. I understand there are 3 different models at the moment.
We have the original model, the RSP1. You have the RSP2 and the RSP2 Pro. The RSP1 is a single input device. Goes from 10 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz. Has 8 pre-select filters, and is completely compatible with SDR Uno, which is our proprietary front end, SDR console version 2.5 and 3, HD SDR, Cubic SDR, any software package that will support an EXTIO will support the RSP, 1 or 2. The RSP2 is a 3-input device. You have 2 SMA inputs and a high Z. So the SMAs are from 1.5 megahertz up. The high Z is from 0 to 30. So if you have a long wire, any type of long wire antenna, you could use the high Z. It has 10 pre-select filters versus the RSP's 1. It has a bias T output on the B output, so if you want to power an L and A, you don't have to run additional power. You just do it right off the coax. And it has a medium wave and FM broadcast filter that you can enable directly in the software.
Sure. So as John was saying, that range of frequencies you can receive there, right? From what was the bottom again?
From on the 2, it's from 1 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz.
So massive range. I mean, pretty much everything you can ever want us to, really.
10 megahertz of spectrum at one time.
And just to be clear, these are receivers. This is not
correct.
Yeah, sure.
These are strictly RX devices.
And you can work these in tandem with a rig if you're an amateur radio person. So how might that work?
If your rig has an IF output or an RF output, naturally the radio, when you key up, is going to shunt those ports to ground. So you would then tether them straight to the RSP, and you have your own dedicated pan adapter.
So you can actually view the RF spectrum on the computer.
You have full rig control. If your rig doesn't have those ports, there's additional boxes. There's aftermarket boxes that you can pick up from all the companies from, I guess, DX Engineering, MFJ, they all have something.
And that's also a different mindset. So people that are used to using a radio with a knob on the front and a dial, compared to using a computer screen, how does that differ, and how is it?
In my experience from being I'm a fairly new ham, but I'm very addicted to chasing DX, where if I want to chase DX with a traditional knob, it's a little bit difficult, at least for me. For when I'm looking at the spectrum, I can follow the propagation, I can follow the contacts, I can follow where the band is shifting, or if somebody's working split, where that opening might be, and I have a chance to make a contact with that station. Because they're only throwing out numbers. You have very little time to break a pileup. Otherwise, they're gonna say QRZ. You won't have a shot.
It's too late.
Yeah.
So having that. So what you're saying?
I personally have a clear advantage using using
it's
an
almost
SDR.
Like an unfair advantage, I suppose, having a visual view of the spectrum.
You can start at the bottom of a band. So let's say if we're going to work 40, and I'll start at the bottom end of the band and work my way up every signal during a contest, and close out a contest as just calling stations within 10 minutes. If somebody else pops up on the band, I can click right on it and go right to it.
So that search and pounds technique
it's
of
exactly
contesting
what it is. Click and pound.
Click and pounds.
Yeah,
that's the new way of doing it. Yeah, that's fantastic. You mentioned about software, and when we chatted before, we started to record about some of the devices that are supported by the product. So you mentioned obviously PCs and those sorts. So what sorts of kit can you plug your device into?
The RSP1 is supported with Android devices using SDR Touch. It's supported obviously on the Windows platform using HD SDR, SDR Console, Cubic SDR, or SDR Uno, or anything that has an EXTIO interface. On the Mac, it's Cubic SDR. And Raspberry Pi, we have our own image.
Okay. All right. So you just download the image and away you go.
And you're using Cubic SDR, and you don't have to compile.
And is that something that you've written yourselves? Those you said
the developer did everything.
So the Cubic SDR is an SDR Play product. Is that right?
No. Cubic SDR is an independent front end. So we were in touch with the developer since it's open source, and then we included it in a download. Since everything is free and open source, it stays within the license.
So pure SDR Play is purely a hardware product.
Correct.
And you're using third-party, often open source software.
Except for SDR Uno is proprietary. That's our software package.
And I think also, so you mentioned about the RSP1, the RSP2, and the RSP2 Pro.
Correct.
I believe there's something new as well on the horizon.
There's an update coming out for SDR Uno.
Right.
We're showcasing it here at Lincoln just to gauge to see how the people like it. It will be released in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
In about 2 weeks' time. A lot of changes.
So that's quite new then. That's quite
brand new. It's just finished being compiled.
Fantastic. Excellent.
On a customer inputs and feedback, and a lot of kind of trying to sort of arbitrate between different opinions. It's become really fun, but that's all part of this culture of listening.
So the community effort then is really about getting that feedback
to the users.
Yeah.
So John, back to you. You mentioned this is a UK company, so just talk a little bit about what's produced in the UK, development, etc.
So we've got seven people in the company total. We're quite a small company, and we subcontract all we can, but we're very keen to have a lot of British content. And in fact, we subcontract the manufacture to a company in Peterborough, and even the plastic boxes are made in Rutland. So it's very much a UK product. Our technical team are based where these days we will work from home and come together when we need to, and for events like here at Newark, and it's most of the time it's Skype and remote, and really working with our customers and talking to them and feedback. And I'd like to just put it back to Mike. in terms of how he supports them.
Okay.
So yeah, Mike. So your role then at SDR plays around that support and building that community.
Correct. I've put up. Well, first was we redid the SDR Uno manual. That was the first thing that needed to be done to make it a little bit more user intuitive, instead of just a printed, just a text manual. So it's more with example and graphics. And then going forward from that is to the SDR Uno video series that I did on YouTube. So it's on SDR Play's YouTube channel.
Okay.
There has to be at least 24 videos now.
So you're the star of the videos, then?
Yeah, I do all the demos of all the different things and of the versatility of SDR Uno. Since I come from an HF listening background, I'm a little bit biased from 0 to 30 megahertz, but that doesn't limit the product. You can decode DSD, you can decode DMR, P25, anything that's out there.
So I think it's like John was saying. It's I think maybe before we start to record, it's where you've got that real flexibility because
Correct.
you're not doing this in hardware.
No, it's in software.
Yeah.
So as long as there's a demodulator out there, you can tether it right with the RSP and using SDR Uno and pipe. Yeah.
Your product never becomes obsolete in the sense that the software is always improving, whether it's our SDR Uno, whether it's Simon Brown with his SDR console, the German guys with their very, very stable HD SDR, and, we have fanatics that love them all.
Fantastic. So just to wrap up then, so Mike, a little bit about if people want to get more information or want to sort of make a purchase, how would they go about doing that?
They can go straight to sdrplay.com. And they can click right on distributors, and we would like if they use our distributors because it might be local to them.
Sure.
If not, if they're local to the UK, they can get it straight from, I believe it's Martin Lynch and Son, or it's straight from
Well, they have a choice. They can come straight to us, click on the website, click on the purchase page, and we're looking forward to meeting even more customers.
Absolutely. And if people got questions, or you mentioned about some of the support available for the product.
They can
How does that
open up
work?
a support ticket if they have any questions, or they can post in the official forum, or they're more than welcome to go to the SDR Play Facebook group, where, like I said, there's close to 7,000 members.
Sure.
You can literally post a question any time of the day, and you'll have somebody respond from some part of the world within 5 minutes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You can't say better than that. Well, John and Mike, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Chris.
it's been great to meet up with you here at the Hamfest, and have a good Hamfest.
You too. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi everyone, as we wrap up episode 249, just one to go before our episode 250, and as I say, we've just returned here from Newark Hamfest, so we're just putting together the last of the show before releasing for you here on the Sunday morning. As always, we'd like to thank our donors, our monthly and annual subscription donors, and also Dave Bowie, Zulu Lima 4 Delta Romeo Bravo, for helping keep the podcast advert free. As you know, guys, visiting icqpodcast.com/donate helps us keep the show advert free. And certainly talking to many listeners in Newark at the UK Hamfest, they certainly enjoy the way the show certainly is advert free. So we would certainly like to continue that from there. We'd like to obviously thank the guys who joined us on the round table in this episode: Chris Howard, Mike November Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa. Thank you very much for helping us out, and also for Chris as well for the features episode with his conversation with SDR Play that was recorded there at the Newark Hamfest. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Keep in touch as usual ways. Contact us through the website, icqpodcast.com, the Facebook group, our Twitter handles, or our LinkedIn profiles. As say, more than welcome to hear what's going on in hobby. Send us any news and information that you have that's going on in your club that might be of interest to other listeners. You're more than welcome. So I think that just about wraps up everything for this episode 249. As I say, we'll be working out on episode 250, which will be the next one, which is certainly a very nice milestone. And as I say, guys, we're working on some interviews that we've recorded at Newark, which are very interesting interviews, which we're sure you'll hope you enjoy as part of episode 250. Well, we'll certainly do this all again in a fortnight's time. In the meantime, 73 is all. Bye-bye.